My parents laughed. You should be thanking us for even paying your tuition. Right before skipping my graduation for my sister's soccer match. She smirked. No one wants to hear your name anyway. So I got up, took the stage, and said something that made everyone stop applauding. I, 22M, never thought my graduation day would become the turning point that changed everything between my family and me forever, but here we are. The morning started like any other family argument. My parents sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through their phones while my younger sister bounced excitedly about her regional soccer semifinals happening that same afternoon. I reminded them that my graduation ceremony was at 2 p.m., and I really hoped they could make it since I was graduating summa cum laude from my engineering program. My father barely looked up from his phone when he told me they'd already committed to attending my sister's match. When I pressed the issue, explaining how important this was to me after 4 years of grueling coursework, my mother laughed in that dismissive way that had become all too familiar. She said I should be thanking them for even paying my tuition instead of complaining about them missing one ceremony. The words hit me like a slap. I'd worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college, taken out student loans, and maintained a 3.9 GPA while they funded my sister's private soccer coaching, travel teams, and equipment without question. My sister, sitting there in her new cleats that probably cost more than my textbooks for an entire semester, smirked at me and said no one would want to hear my name called anyway. That's when something inside me snapped. I'd spent years being the forgotten child, the one whose achievements were met with lukewarm congratulations while my sister's every goal was celebrated like she'd won the World Cup. I'd been patient, understanding, and supportive. But not today. I told them fine, they should go to the soccer match. I'd handle graduation on my own, just like I'd handled everything else. The disappointment in my voice must have been obvious, but they seemed relieved they wouldn't have to sit through what my father called a boring ceremony. As I drove to campus alone, wearing the cap and gown I'd picked up the week before, I felt a strange mix of hurt and determination building inside me. My phone buzzed with messages from classmates asking if my family was coming, and I lied, saying they were running late, but would be there. The auditorium was packed with proud families, cameras flashing, and the excited buzz of achievement filling the air. I sat in my assigned seat in the front section with other honors students, watching parents beam with pride as they waited for their children's names to be called. The empty seats where my family should have been felt like a void. When the dean began announcing the summa cum laude graduates, I realized this was my moment. Not just to walk across the stage, but to do something that would make them understand exactly what they'd chosen to miss. I'd been selected as one of 3 students to give brief remarks during the honors portion of the ceremony. The speech I'd prepared was standard, thanking professors, acknowledging family support, looking forward to the future. But sitting there, looking at all those proud families, I decided to scrap it entirely. When my turn came, I walked to the podium with my heart pounding. The auditorium fell quiet as I adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. I began by thanking my professors and acknowledging my fellow graduates, but then I shifted direction. I talked about the students who'd made it here despite challenges at home. I mentioned those who'd worked multiple jobs to pay their way, who'd studied in empty dorm rooms during family celebrations they couldn't afford to attend, who'd learned to celebrate their own victories because no one else would. The audience was listening intently now. I could see some parents shifting uncomfortably, while others nodded in understanding. Then I said that today, some of us were graduating not just with degrees, but with the knowledge that we could achieve anything we set our minds to, with or without support from those who should have been our biggest cheerleaders. I mentioned that while some families were here celebrating academic achievement, others had chosen youth sports tournaments over their child's once-in-a-lifetime milestone. The auditorium was completely silent now. I could see professors exchanging glances, and some parents were pulling out their phones, clearly recording what was becoming an unexpectedly pointed speech. I concluded by saying that for those of us graduating alone today, we weren't really alone. We had each other, we had mentors who believed in us, and most importantly, we learned we could believe in ourselves. The achievement belonged to us, and no one could take that away or diminish it by choosing not to witness it. The silence stretched for a long moment before someone in the back started clapping. Then another person joined in, and within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. It wasn't the polite graduation applause I'd expected. It was something rawer, more emotional. People were standing, and I could see some wiping their eyes. As I walked back to my seat, several professors nodded at me with what looked like respect and understanding. My phone was buzzing in my pocket, but I ignored it. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. When they called my name for the individual recognition, the applause seemed louder than for the previous students. A few people even whistled. Walking across that stage, shaking the dean's hand, receiving my diploma, it felt more meaningful somehow, doing it for myself rather than for anyone else's approval. After the ceremony, I was surrounded by classmates and their families. Several parents approached me to say how much my speech had resonated with them, sharing stories about their own family dynamics or children who'd struggled for recognition. One mother actually hugged me and said I'd given her a new perspective on how she'd been treating her own son's achievements. My phone had been buzzing constantly throughout these conversations. When I finally checked it, I had dozens of missed calls and messages from my parents and sister. Apparently, someone at the soccer match had been watching the graduation livestream on their phone and had started talking about the speech. Word had spread quickly through the stands. My sister's first message was angry, accusing me of ruining her day and embarrassing the family. My parents' messages started apologetic but quickly turned defensive, saying I'd made them look terrible in front of people they knew. But then the calls started coming from extended family members. My grandfather, who'd been trying to watch the live stream from his nursing home, left a voicemail saying he was proud of me for standing up for myself. My aunt messaged that she'd always known my parents favored my sister but hadn't realized how bad it had gotten. The real surprise came that evening. My cousin called to tell me that the speech had gone viral on social media. Someone had recorded it and posted it with a caption about family priorities, and it was spreading rapidly across platforms. Local news stations were picking it up as a story about academic achievement versus youth sports culture. By the next morning, I was getting interview requests from news outlets and podcasts. The story had struck a nerve with people who'd experienced similar family dynamics. Parents were sharing it as a wake-up call about how they prioritized their children's activities, and students were sharing their own stories of feeling overlooked. My parents finally showed up at my apartment that afternoon, looking haggard and angry. They demanded I do something to stop the spread of the video and make public statements walking back what I'd said. They claimed I was destroying our family's reputation and hurting my sister's chances for college scholarships if coaches saw the negative attention. I told them I hadn't mentioned any names or specific details that could identify our family, so any reputation damage was self-inflicted by their own reactions. If they were embarrassed, maybe they should consider why a general speech about family priorities felt like a personal attack. My sister was crying, saying her teammates were teasing her and asking if she was the sister who was more important than a college graduation. She accused me of being jealous and vindictive, trying to ruin her soccer career out of spite. That's when I realized they still didn't understand the real issue. They were focused on damage control and protecting their image, not on examining why my words had resonated with so many people or acknowledging the years of prioritizing one child over another. I made a decision that surprised even me. I told them I was moving across the country for a job opportunity I'd been considering. The viral speech had actually led to several unexpected job offers from companies who'd seen the coverage and were impressed by my academic record and communication skills. My parents demanded I stay and work things out as a family, but I pointed out that they'd made their family priorities clear long before graduation day. I was simply accepting reality and building a life that didn't depend on their approval or support. The hardest part was realizing that my moment of standing up for myself had created a permanent rift. My parents genuinely seemed to believe they'd been fair and supportive, just busy with my sister's more immediate needs. They couldn't see the pattern of behavior that had led to that moment on stage. Update 1. 3 months later, I'm settled in my new city with a job that values my skills and achievements. The viral video eventually died down, but its impact on my life has been permanent in ways I never expected. My sister's soccer team made it to state championships, and my parents sent me pictures as if nothing had happened. They still don't seem to grasp that missing my graduation wasn't just about one day. It was the culmination of years of feeling like the consolation prize child. The most unexpected outcome has been the connections I've made with other people who resonated with my story. I've received hundreds of messages from students, parents, and adults who've experienced similar family dynamics. Some have thanked me for helping them find their voice, while others have shared their own stories of learning to validate their own achievements. A few weeks ago, my grandfather passed away. At his funeral, several family members mentioned how proud he'd been of my graduation speech. My grandmother pulled me aside and said he'd watched the video dozens of times, telling everyone at the nursing home about his grandson who'd stood up for himself with dignity and grace. My parents were polite but distant at the funeral. My sister, now a high school senior looking at college soccer programs, seemed different somehow, less certain that her achievements automatically made her the favorite child. She actually approached me and asked if I thought she was a bad person for being happy that our parents came to her games. I told her she wasn't responsible for our parents' choices or priorities. She'd never asked to be the favored child, and she shouldn't feel guilty for accepting the support they offered. But she also needed to understand that being the favorite came with consequences for our relationship as siblings. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Update 2. 6 months after graduation, I received an unexpected call from my former university. They wanted to invite me back as a guest speaker for their next graduation ceremony, specifically to address students who might be attending without family support. The dean said my speech had become part of their orientation materials for students from difficult family situations. Preparing for that return speech made me reflect on how much had changed. The angry, hurt young man who'd grabbed that microphone had evolved into someone who understood that standing up for yourself doesn't always lead to reconciliation. Sometimes it leads to growth. My parents and I now have a cordial but distant relationship. We text on birthdays and holidays, and they've stopped expecting me to prioritize their comfort over my own well-being. It's not the family relationship I'd hoped for, but it's honest in a way it never was before. My sister and I are slowly building something new. She started calling me occasionally, usually when she's struggling with the pressure to be perfect that comes with being the golden child. She's beginning to understand that our parents' favoritism wasn't actually a gift. It was a burden that limited her ability to fail, learn, and grow independently. The job opportunity that came from the viral speech turned into a career path I'd never imagined. Working for a company that values authenticity and clear communication has shown me what it feels like to have my contributions genuinely appreciated rather than grudgingly acknowledged. But the most significant change has been internal. I no longer measure my worth by other people's reactions to my achievements. That graduation speech wasn't really about getting revenge on my family. It was about finally accepting that I deserved to celebrate my own success, with or without anyone else's permission. The standing ovation that day wasn't just for my words. It was for every student who'd ever felt overlooked, every achievement that had been minimized, and every person who'd learned to be their own biggest supporter. In trying to make my family understand what they'd missed, I discovered something more valuable: the confidence to build a life that didn't require their validation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let their limitations define your possibilities. Looking back, I'm grateful they missed my graduation. If they'd been there, I might never have found the courage to speak my truth, and I definitely wouldn't have learned that I could succeed without their approval. Their absence taught me a lesson about self-reliance that their presence never could have provided. That empty space where they should have been sitting became the foundation for everything I've built since.